Recording in progress. Where was I? So also at the end of March, which was the halfway point for the public workshop process, I also happened to have been scheduled for a synopsis of our project to the granting organization. USDA UAIP has quarterly calls with all the grant recipients. So I presented it to them, and that's all with the purpose of sort of setting this up for future rounds of funding. The beauty of this particular grant program is that it was no match requirement, and there she is, and there's a $300,000 maximum award. So if we can parlay this planning grant into that implementation grant, then that will be really, really beneficial. I think, as you also know, we've applied for some smaller private foundation grants. Maura Roby, who's on the call, submitted on behalf of this project to the Kubota Foundation. It's more of a contest than a grant. They open it up for proposals, and on August 1st, they will announce 2 finalists from each of 10 regions that they've separated the country in. If you're selected as a finalist, you will get money. You either get $50,000 if you're first, or $10,000 if you're second. So the application was good. You know, we've got a good story to tell. We also, thanks to the Trails Committee, have pictures of Thompson volunteers on Kubota equipment, which is very helpful. I mean, it says it's not a requirement, but I'm sure it doesn't hurt.
Right.
So anyway, so if we are announced as a finalist on the 1st of August, they have 2 weeks of online voting, and that's how they will determine their first versus second prize. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that announcement, because we'll want to share that far and wide. A couple of months ago, I also submitted a quick request to the Lowe's Foundation to try to close the renovation grant gap for the building itself. I think I asked for 300,000 in that. I don't even remember when they announced those, but it's sometime in the summer. Who knows? National foundations are often really highly subscribed. The CIF grant application that I submitted for round 4 was unsuccessful, but round 5 opened today, and I've got a one-on-one with the director of the program next week. And I also have a call scheduled with State Senator Gordon and DECD tomorrow to discuss the application. So I'm really aggressively trying to push getting some money in the door from that CIF grant, because that's a big one. That's like 3.8 million. And at the end of last week, the congressional appropriations process opened through Congressman Courtney's office. It opened at the last minute because applications to it are due tomorrow at noon. So I spent most of today working. I mean, it's a short form, but it's still an application form. So I spent most of today working up a draft, which I will submit tomorrow to both close the renovation gap on the building and also get the site work done. So I'm gonna, so the building where this facility will be housed still has renovation that needs to be done. Oh, you were there with us when Rep. Courtney visited last time. And then we have the cost estimates in the design concepts for the site work for the permaculture park. So between those 2 pieces, it's like $750,000. So I am submitting that as an appropriations request. Who knows? I mean, all these things are highly competitive, but that's why I sent that email out today. I think there was some confusion as to what I was requesting letters of support for. So it's to close the renovation gap and do the site work related to 65 Main. So the building and the permaculture park and food forest. And letters of support are required. Fortunately, I have enough from past grant applications that I have stuff to submit, but if I have some refreshed ones, that would also be very helpful. So if anybody who's inclined to scan something over to me before noon, If you're a member of an organization, it would be helpful to have that on your organizational letterhead. If you're just responding as a stakeholder in this process and a private citizen, then yes, that as well. I love letters of support because they're an easy way to show that we're not operating in a vacuum.
How do we access the letterhead? Because if I were to do trails, I don't have their letterhead.
I can send it to you, or you can send me something on Word and ask me to put it on the Trails letterhead, and I should have it. I have probably about half of the town departments on file because I helped people set so many of them up.
Would we, should we, or can we, or do we have access to letterhead?
Oh, God, yeah. As board members, I can send it to you.
And you, not to be lazy, but I'm also busy. Do you have like a?
I do not, and Kathleen and Steve Herbert asked me, I just noticed, sent me an email request for that too. I don't generally prepare boilerplate letters to give people because I don't think people read them. Once they see more than one that's the same.
Yeah.
So I also find that my writing style is so freaking distinctive that it's immediately obvious when I've written something.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we had. If you had an example from anybody, I just.
I can, yeah, I can.
You know, however.
I can probably
Top or
find
whatever.
one and send it out first thing in the morning
Yeah.
before I get on my call with Senator Gordon.
Okay, that would be good, and I'll have to way at it, at work.
I would be happy to have that. And it's not a requirement for anybody, but anybody who can pass that up, it does help.
So you have a formal one from me. Do you want me to just refresh it? and
Yeah.
put a new date on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the easiest thing if you've done one in the past.
Yeah.
So that's where we are, or have been to this point. And now today we're in starting month 7. So the second half of the public workshop process, which we've designated as the starting the 3-month education unit. So Melinda and I spoke a couple of weeks ago about, some of the things we need to discuss, and I'm going to turn it over to her to guide most of that conversation. I'm running the recording, so I'll have that to make notes from, to add into the rolling summary of what we've done. And then both the recording and the written record will inform that master plan that the other organizational partners and I will author in the last 6 months of the project. Yeah, Jean.
Just real quick, I want to know if it's okay if I give your information for someone to contact you, like.
Always. I'm a public employee, so.
Like, I wanted to talk to, the owner of Logi's and ask them for support or any kind of help that they can provide for us.
That'd be great. That'd be fantastic. I was going to say something else before I turned. And then at the end of the 3-month education unit, and Amanda's here from Connecticut RC&D as well. So RC&D has been one of our organizational partners. We're going to move back to the library. We're going to do one with speakers. And we're trying to arrange for a speaker from a related incubator program, maybe somebody from Willimantic Co-op, and then a startup farmer who's accessed some of the grant programs that are out there, just to give it a sense of what might be possible in this. So that's sort of the arc that we're on right now. And with no further ado, I'll turn it over to Melinda to run down some of the items on the rest of the agenda.
Well, we met with Eric Francis, and I don't see him on.
He's not on
But Eric Francis is a consultant that we worked with when we wrote the farm to school grant for the aquaponics farm that we have at the school. He has developed a lot of curriculum for this farm to fork type of programming. So he did have an opportunity to talk to Tara a couple of times about the program, and he has a developed curriculum that we access for the aquaponic farm. However, that kind of tucks into a science class that we currently have. But when I think about developing a scope and sequence that's aligned to the work that's going to happen at 65 Main, I see it as more of a agricultural piece to it, but then there's the business piece, because we do have a business department, and our FBLA students very much engaged in the business aspect of things. And then there's that whole other, you know, part of the planning that has to do with just the outside what do you call it?
Permaculture.
Permaculture, that would be very interesting for a botany class, right? So I see it in 3 different waves. And then we also have the culinary program that's very active in the school. So there has to be a tie-in to culinary. So the biggest thing that we have to figure out is, what are those big chunks of scope and sequence that's going to align to the project of 65 Main. Obviously, there's an agriculture piece. Local procurement is a big deal for Farm to School. There's another grant coming out in the fall. They are encouraging school districts to use more local produce in their food service department. The aquaponics farm does actually lend itself nicely. The lettuce that we grow goes right into food service, but I see a better connection if you have things growing down at 65 Main, where we could bring that local stuff into the program. So there's one big piece of that, you know, the agriculture piece, that I'm very interested in. I know this doesn't fit nicely with what's happening at 65 Main, but we are also looking at vet tech and large animal vet tech. And so, you know, just the idea around some of that can fit in. And then, of course, the whole business aspect, when you talk about those incubator programs, is there a program that the school could set up there? So in my head, it's agriculture and business, and then a little bit of science. So 3 different prongs to the curriculum, and then developing a scope and sequence that's going to match what's happening at 65 Main.
So could you, for the people who aren't on the Board of Ed, or, you know, haven't been as closely involved with some of the other career path development, can you just sort of describe how, let's use culinary, because that's both the most recent and sort of the most closely aligned with where we are. I mean, that was a couple of years from start to finish.
It was almost 3 years of cobbling together, because putting that kitchen together, it's a commercial grade kitchen. There was no local taxpayer dollars that went into that. So that was all cobbled together, grant money. So the first thing that had to happen was we had to have a space designed. We got some local, Kitteridge is I guess a commercial kitchen, and they came in, vendor, and they came in and they did a free layout for us. So we figured out what the space would look like. We went after grant money, and we did it in phases. So every time we got some grant funding, we were able to do a portion of the upgrade to that space. And then we used a lot of in-house local, our maintenance crew did a phenomenal job making that space ready. Once we had it ready, then we had to figure out who was going to teach it and how are we going to cover the cost of that instructor's salary. We had a current program that was running family and consumer science. If you think about the old home ec program, it wasn't very well attended. Students were, we had very light classes. It wasn't an area of interest. Culinary was more of an area of interest. So unfortunately, we kind of had to move that particular teacher out. The teacher didn't eventually retire, so she didn't lose a job. So that was all good news. And then we were able to hire an industry chef who is certified in teaching culinary arts at the school. So finding the right instructor is another component of this, because I can tell you now, just based on the staffing that we have and the courses that we offer, if we're going to have a point person that's going to engage these 3 kind of ideas about curriculum, there's going to need to be a point person that's in charge of that. And I, at this moment in time, don't have a situation where I can switch out one faculty member and bring in another. So as we're thinking and developing curriculum, we also have to think about, there will be a cost associated with that because there will be a staffing impact. Because we will be looking for somebody to teach that. It's not like we can tuck a few things into the current curriculum, like into a botany class, into culinary class. But if we want it to run well, someone is going to need to be the instructor of these, or at least overseeing the program as well as I can see it. But in the culinary phase, and then we found a retired chef from Massachusetts who was school certified. And he has written curriculum as he is implementing it this year. So we will have a full written curriculum by the end of this school year, so that anybody that when he really does retire, which he's going to give us 2 more years, the next person that we hire will have a curriculum to work from. And the curriculum is the foundation of it all. The written documents are the foundation of it all. And so time spent developing the scope and sequence and what the curriculum priorities are for this project are key. And that work can start now.
So Amanda, I wonder if you've got any insights, knowledge of similar vocational programs that have been set up at other, preferably public high schools, although, you know, if there's an analog in a private school that you know of, that's great too. There was at RC&D for some time, somebody working specifically on educational tie-ins, as I recall.
Yes, that was Jillian. She only works seasonally for us now. She was our youth and education and outreach. She actually developed curriculum for our national RC&D around soil health. And that kind of programming. I'm familiar with Eric in the aquaponic world, specifically the vocational schools like Lebanon that I'm familiar with might have a focus on greenhouse production, you know, so I think it can vary depending on the strengths and weaknesses of their VOAG teacher base, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in the public workshop process, and I think this is where we can start to discuss more, what really jazzed people was the idea of that farm to fork idea. Obviously it's very much a part of the zeitgeist now, right? People talk about that all the time in all kinds of different contexts. So it does make some sense. But you know, what does that mean to that connection, right? So the fork piece, you've already got it up there,
Right.
which is that culinary.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
About that culinary, I do know this guy who is a head chef for the MIT. I can probably give him your information, maybe he can connect with you. And I thought maybe I have an idea of maybe we can have a multi-pole special guest as a, you know, for the classes. And since I know you have something set up for the first year, but as time goes by, we can have multiple small workshops for that. I can talk to that, you know, give that guy, the chef from MIT, your information.
Yeah, you can always give anybody my information pretty much for any reason. That's just the way that is. So I mean, it's setting up a curriculum. Well, I guess so. Scope and sequence, I think we're referring to as all the pre-development, right? In the order in which
Correct.
we are doing those things to just even get us to the point where kids can actually be in a class.
I think the easiest part, as I'm just trying to segment this in my head, the easiest part is that culinary already exists, right?
Mhm.
And it's already up and running. So the connection to the Farm to Fork program through culinary makes the most sense initially. But as we think about, you know, branching off through agriculture or the business or even the science part of it could come later. But I would think that, you know, developing something with culinary right out of the chute would probably be the easiest set of courses that we could put together.
So again, Amanda, is that something that you have any particular knowledge of across the state?
I don't work I work with farmers predominantly, so I think that my expertise, if you will, is not in the high school realm. That's not to say that we can't help with the reach out to some of the VOAG schools across the state to see what they're doing if that's what you're getting at.
So, we are, dual enrollment is a big push in this state, and so we have received a grant to get dual enrollment credit at Manchester State College, Community College, for culinary. It seems like that partnership is unraveling as we speak, so I am contacting Johnson and Wales because it's equally as close. I won't be able to use any of the grant money to have an articulation agreement with Johnson and Wales, but we also have a partnership, partnership in the infancy stages with New Boston Beef. And so Sarah Eddy and her husband are very interested in doing this whole farm to fork. And if we can pull in New Boston Beef as part of this project, she very much wants to develop curriculum with culinary for the very same reason, right? But she's going to take our students and actually give them internships in her business so that they can prepare the food. So if somehow we can pull all three things together and sit down and talk about what that curriculum could look like, I think that might be good. And if I can just get that connection with a community college or a regular college, and it seems like Manchester isn't going to, they feel they're too far away, and it's just a big mess. But anyway, I've already reached out to Johnson and Wales because Chef Fran, who is our teacher, already had an articulation agreement with them when he was in Massachusetts. So I think this is going to be easier. For some reason, Manchester won't take his credentials. He's got 32 years as a school culinary chef. And for some reason, because he doesn't have an associate's degree, although he is certified in Connecticut to teach culinary arts, somehow that's not working, but he's already established something with Johnson and Wales. So we're kind of going that way. So hopefully I'll be able to make a connection with them and then kind of pull everything together. The thing I see is in his schedule right now, every single one of his classes are jammed. We had 180 kids for like 160 kids for 80 seats. So everybody had an interest in culinary arts. So it's a big interest area. So he would need another set of classes that are going to kind of run parallel to culinary. That
And
would
you have
connect.
one instructor in the culinary program.
One instructor.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, with that kind of popularity.
It's
Yes.
just started.
It
Well,
just
that's
started.
true. That's true.
It just started, and luckily, everybody had to take culinary 1 this year because there was no, so as these kids segue through, they're going to start to separate 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're pretty excited about the interest level of that program. So you know that there can be a direct connection to the work that you're doing at 65 Main because there's interest there. Plus, pulling in Sarah Eddy is going to be huge, where she's going to give kids practical experiences out in the job market to prepare foods and whatever she's doing there. I haven't been there yet.
So I have some practical questions for, again, when we're starting to put together the real master plan, right? The product that we deliver at the end of this year process. Obviously, part of it is going to be describing what our goals are, including some level of hypothetical detail.
Right.
So the two questions that immediately spring to mind are, how do you break the day up for a kid in any one of these vocational programs? What does their academic versus vocational course load look like? Even though we're not, I mean, technically it's not a vocational school, but these are vocational
Yeah.
programs.
So we changed the schedule this year. So we have a block schedule, which means we went from like a 48-minute period to a 90-minute period because they can't get into the kitchen, right? And then they just get in there and have to close up. They wouldn't even have time to bake anything. So that was key, changing the schedule over. We do we have been playing with the schedule so that we offer students that are in the junior and senior year opportunities to do work study or have time at the end of the day so that they can get some hands-on experiences in their career pathway. So when I think about that, you know, those periods that are at the end of the day, could they go over to 65 Main and do whatever? They're either in part of the incubator and the business part of it, or is there work that they can do right on the grounds as part of their program? So those last periods at the end of the day, especially the very last period, is that opportunity for kids to actually get out and do work outside of the school. So that the structure to do this work is already embedded in the current schedule that we have now.
And how many hours per week would you say is taken up by the vocational as opposed to
So-
the pure academic?
Freshmen and sophomores have to get a lot of their course stuff out of the way up front. We try to make sure that they can take a course of interest, either their freshman or sophomore year. Juniors and seniors have more flexibility in their schedule, so they could maybe do two 90-block periods, and do some more
Per
field
day
time-
or per week?
Per day.
Per day.
Per day, to do some more field work. So as the students satisfy their graduation requirements, the other component that's new that we're piloting this year is that every senior starting next year will have to do a capstone project, which means they have to identify a topic of interest, a project of interest, and then they have to do a lot of research, job shadowing, volunteer hours, and then they come before a panel of community members and present their project, and then they're scored on that. And if they do well and hit the criteria, then that's one component of the graduation requirement that they have to do. So every senior next year will have to do that kind of project. We have 6 students piloting it this year, actually, on June 6th. We have our first capstone presentation with those 6 students. And then next year, everybody has to do that. So I think that there's going to be more opportunity, and you're going to see more students out into the community because they're going to have to do these big projects. It's a full year study.
So then the other question I had has to do with instructors. So you've got one instructor in the culinary
Yep.
program. So we are talking about something somewhat non-traditional in a high school setting, which is teaching agriculture, and then as it relates to culinary. So what would you foresee as well as the hurdles to staffing this kind of program? What kind of standards would staff have to meet in order to even be eligible to work there?
State
So-
certification,
So the good, please.
state certifications.
So actually, the state has had a lot of flexibility in getting people certified. So if you're in the industry and you have X amount of years, they will look over your credential and they will give you an industry certification to teach in public schools. That's huge. As I'm starting to look down the road when Mike Joyce, everybody knows Mike, right? So when Mike Joyce retires, who's going to pick up the welding piece that we're like knee deep in? I spent all day in Groton this morning. Like, we're knee deep in this welding program. Well, when Mike retires, I am going to need somebody from the welding industry, right, to come in. And so they've relaxed a lot of the certification rules. Our current construction teacher actually is industry certified. He's not teacher certified, he's industry certified. We have to kind of backfill the teaching part of it and the behavior management and all of the stuff that comes with it. But so it's a lot easier now to get instructors from the industry into schools. So I don't think that's a huge hurdle as far as certification. I think finding that person, when I think about someone like Sarah Eddy, who went through a culinary program, she's working on a farm, somebody like her would be key in trying to understand what the scope and sequence, the curriculum points that we need to hit to make it all align and work. But somebody like her who has farm experience, that has culinary experience. I'm sure there are people out there. Eric is one of them. He
Eric
has
is
that.
one.
Yeah.
So, and Amanda, that's going back to you, and again, knowing that your experience is primarily with farmers, what I'm hearing Melinda say is that there may be ways in which these professionals
Yeah.
can be brought into this setting. Now, in my mind, that seems to be a natural role for RC&D to play in this project development. You can give me your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think if their experience is that, you know, so for instance, Adam from Unbound Glory in Pomfret traditionally has been trained as a chef and then turned farmer and then turned back and merged his two skills into a food truck that is, you know, pops around at places like Taylor Brook Winery and places like that. So I think it takes a certain skill set, public speaking and all of that, but I don't think it's impossible to find. I think it also might be helpful to understand, have you connected with anyone from Department of Ag already directly from the Farm to School program and see where there could be some possible collaboration?
No, not at this point, because, you know, we were just running our aquaponic farm as part of a grant project, so we haven't
Okay.
branched out beyond our little inner circle. We're spearheading a lot of pathways all at one time, and it's a little unwieldy at this point, but it's something we should do. We have not connected with UConn since putting in that initial application to Farm to School, and that predates the pandemic, so that was a while ago.
I guess I'm just thinking that, you know, your Farm to School point of contact at DOAG may have, you know, school chefs that are, you know, trying to use more Connecticut grown produce already, you know, in that school setting might be an accessory role that they could potentially play in teaching. So that's, I guess, why I'm bringing that point up.
That and our food service program, because local procurement is a big deal for the federal meal program. And so food service actually has more connections to our farmers now than local farmers than ever before. So I might even be able to tap into my own food service folks.
So I could theoretically, I could invite DOAG, for example, to the next meeting to give us some information
That'd be a
on
good
what they
idea.
would like to see. Who is the contact there on the Farm to School program?
So for Farm to School specifically, it would be Hannah Hardy. I not worked with her directly, but I can drop her info in the chat.
Yeah,
Great.
that'd be great. And, you know, I met somebody when I was down for the event at the mushroom farm, but I met so many people that day that I don't remember if she was one of them. The name's not
You
that.
probably met Jamie Smith, who's like the bureau director. She was attending, as well as Rebecca Eddy, who is connected to the Eddies. And she is the outreach point of contact for the department overall. But
Yeah,
I will put,
Rebecca, I knew, I think
Dennis.
Jamie might have been the person.
yeah, she's the bureau director.
So since we're all here, any questions or comments thus far as we're discussing this? I mean, this is like, this is us working out as a group how we want this to look and behave.
I've got a couple unrelated things, well, two things that are unrelated to each other, they're related to this. Just based on the layout of what we're doing. And we're talking about roping things into the school culinary for like the whole year of a culinary program. I don't know what kind of yields we're gonna have with the land available. It's a, you know, I'm thinking mushrooms and herbs and things and garlic and onions, things like that. It's not, you know, we're not sourcing corn and wheat to make bread things. But so that's something to keep in mind. I think that's what we're looking at for the culinary program.
Right.
Yeah,
Mushrooms and herbs and-
I would say that your instinct is probably correct. You're looking at specialty products or high value products. And actually, when we were
Yeah.
discussing the shipping container farm grants,
Which we didn't get.
which unfortunately the town did not get, Eric Francis, who is the aquaponics
consultant was assisting Melinda with that as well. You know, he was saying that the sort of return on investment, for example, on container grown mushrooms is pretty high. I mean, if you even go to a regular grocery store, wild mushrooms sell for $17, $18, $20 a pound. Of course, you need a lot to make a pound, but just in terms of what you're getting and the density that you can create in the grow space, they're very practical. I think microgreens are another thing that comes up in that context, and Ann Miller has been very interested in that in the past. You know, the existing community garden space, which, let's all be frank, didn't really get any community take up, but was used by Teague and was used by the initial volunteer group during the pandemic to sort of get more food, fresh food into people's hands. It is set up to do intensive raised beds, but to your point, it's still a very finite space.
There was in the plans though for a greenhouse on that property, right?
There is, and if we are successful in the Kubota grant, that is one of the things that we would be putting on the ground first.
Mm.
In that little area that we identified sort of on the north side, which would be the hedgerow for the chestnuts and a little more orcharding. And down into the rain garden, we sort of carved out this little shape that wouldn't be interfered with by ongoing renovations, and was also far enough from the access point to do the stuff in the bottom 3 acres there. Yeah, that greenhouse space is absolutely one of the first non-building pieces that we'd like to put down.
Yeah, and that would be great because I've had experience with curriculum with starter programs out of the greenhouse. We started back in the day when we had federal dollars under the Obama administration. We put in a greenhouse at Lincoln High School. We had our students running that. It was pretty successful. We did a lot of seedling growing there, you know, Mother's Day plants, Christmas trees at Christmas time and wreaths, and it became quite vibrant. A little business there, and our special education students actually ran that. And they got the business exposure, but they also got the exposure of running a greenhouse, a commercial greenhouse, and it worked really well.
So that's actually a good transition point to sort of the next piece, which is the funding mechanisms. And, you know, bringing up the transitional or special education students and some of the other things. I mean, some of these things we're going to find out from DOAG or USDA about grant monies that are available. In your experience, because I don't write grants on the education side, you know, how much of curriculum are grantable, right? How do these funds get generated for these
So
startups?
obviously, if it's a planning grant, a lot of times the curriculum writing happens during that planning grant. And then the second year, especially with farm to school, then it's implementation year. We went right into implementation when we applied for the aquaponics grant, which I was surprised we got because we didn't go through the planning phase. But because Trifecta already had the curriculum written, we were able to kind of springboard from that. But it would be nice to be able to get some farm to school monies for curriculum writing. Curriculum writing really is teacher time, sitting there writing the documents. And it's time consuming because they have to look at state and federal standards on how they align, right? So we can't just write curriculum unless it's anchored to standards that we have to implement in our schools. So we have to look at that. But then it's just developing assessments, looking for resources, you know, materials. So it's labor intense. We're going through that process now because we're getting our NIAS certification. We had our look-see in March. We don't have all our documents written. We've got 2 years to get them all finished. We're pretty much underway, but the sticking block is the teacher time to write them. Trifecta, on the other hand, has a lot of that stuff already written. So partnering with them through this process might be a good thing. And he could help write curriculum, but the grant funding, to get back to your question, very often during that planning part of the grant, you can put curriculum money aside to pay teachers to write curriculum.
It's good to know. So again, this isn't just like the 2 or 3 of us talking at you guys, but you sort of toss in some of your ideas. What, as you guys imagine from the outside, what your community priorities would be for what is taught in this program. What does that look like in your heads? I mean, there's always a sort of a place where what's in your head and the reality that you're required to meet bifurcate, but you still should be starting with a set of goals and aspirations. We've got a couple of BOE members here if they want to kick that off, but please, by all means, everybody sort of put in their 2 cents here.
My other, unrelated to the herbs and mushrooms, other thing, you mentioned, in addition to Mr. Joyce, we have a construction teacher.
Mhm.
Oh, I had no idea.
He's
Yeah,
also a
Kevin
part-time music
Tebow.
teacher.
Mhm. But he came from industry
Right.
and his certification is that.
So where I was going with that, I had no idea we had that, but, so like Ellis Tech, they go around and do projects at sites, like they were in a park in Putnam. My daughter was doing masonry there. But that's what they do as part of their trades program. So I don't know, I didn't know we had I was gonna suggest that as far as tying things into like the footpath or something, to have the masons come in, but if we have,
So,
I don't.
yeah, and so that would be like if Tira said, we need to do X at 65 Main Street, not, we need help with whatever. If I knew now, he could weave it into his curriculum next year, similar to the, 11th Village that Mike did when he started to build those structures. He took it used to be just Mike Joyce.
Right.
Right? And then every year we tried to add some time to get another person in there. And we finally got to a point where we could hire a full-time person. Finding one was challenging.
Yeah.
Somebody that could work with kids. He did have experience working with special education populations, so it was a nice match. But yeah, trying to find the right person, but there can be that connection through construction
But it
too.
sounds like the important piece here is that there's not the flexibility to do things like quickly, that this has to be baked in
Has to
at
be
the
baked
beginning
in.
of a school year or at the very least a semester.
Right.
That's the same with Ellis too. They have a backlog of projects. I know, like, they worked on the YMCA for many, not YMCA, the Woodstock camp. And then, I'm sure that Putnam thing was scheduled well in advance, so that's how they work.
And I think that, even in science, right, whatever's gonna be happening down there near the water and all the plantings and all of that, there is a botany class. We knew ahead of time that the botany students were gonna be involved, then we would have the teacher write that into the curriculum and be able to bring them down and participate in that. But you are right, it's like planning ahead to get it into the curriculum. Teachers are pretty spontaneous, they can be, but they are also really good planners, like they plan. And if you deviate from that plan, sometimes as an administrator, you catch it, because they have planned out their year.
And and again, we're just sort of thinking through the logistics of even at these preliminary stages, let's say we wanted to get the technical program kids, the construction kids
Yeah.
over to do some in-kind work on the 65 Main project while we're waiting for the renovation funding gap to come
Right.
in. We would need to get that on their calendar at what point in the year?
Now,
Now
next year.
or the fall.
Yeah.
So like a 6-month lead.
correct.
Okay, 'cause these are important timeframes to know for all of these things. Because that was something that Mike and I ran into. Mike was trying desperately to work on some of these projects, but our time frame when we were developing the ideas was not the same as his time frame as an instructor.
Correct.
So that created some not friction in personalities, but friction in getting some stuff done.
Oh, I do it to them all the time. I throw a monkey wrench into what they do. I need you to make me this. And then it's like, oh, but we're in the middle of this unit, right? And it doesn't have anything to do with it. So if they can plan ahead and know, okay, this month our students are going down and they're building X, he can plan for that.
Go ahead, Valerie, I see you.
And just clarifying question, they need to know now, not just for fall, but for the whole school year now, right? Meaning all the way through till the end of the school year in 2025.
Yes, and depending on if it's a one semester class or it's a full year course, it really depends.
Right.
Sometimes if we're doing a second semester course and it starts in January, well, then the teachers have some time up front to think about it before the January class starts. So very often we try to tuck things into the second semester.
So again, in keeping with that, now is definitely the time for this discussion of, when you envision this in your heads and, nobody's grading you on this piece. What is it that you see? Where do you think the value is in that farm to fork piece? I think concentrating on the farm piece because the fork piece is already at least partially covered.
Right.
Is it culinary? I'm obviously a plant person, not a culinary person. So as a high schooler, I have the opportunity to go out of the school to go back to school to take horticulture. So they ship me over back and forth, which was wonderful for me. I would have absolutely no interest in the culinary part.
Right.
So does it have to be merged, or can people do one or the other?
In my mind, it would be two separate pathways that kind of partner whenever possible. So we have that happening with culinary and foreign language, right? And culinary and history. Those things culinary in the theater. It does cross over, but they're separate pathways.
Yeah, you would have the agriculture, horticulture part of it would say, hey, chef, what kind of herbs do you want? What kind of mushrooms are the most best selling or the most expensive that we can actually grow here in Connecticut? And so it ties in that regard, but yeah, I don't think you would have the same people growing and cooking.
Well, I think you
You
could,
could.
but you wouldn't necessarily.
They
I,
might-
as somebody who likes to cook, have no interest in growing. So, yeah.
Well, that said, with what you were just mentioning, I was thinking maybe once a year we can have a community involvement, like, how they have the community where they have that yard sale, I can't remember what it's
The
called.
townwide tag sale thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Have something similar to that once a year, which was during Earth Day, and have emerged the culinary and the plant community to have like that big event and
Sort of like an open house.
yes, to everybody, make a big deal, like one of the biggest event we can come up with, and have the high schooler require, make, like, for an example, they're learning about cuttings, and then they sell that. And then make funds for our, once a year, that type of funding. Maybe we can throw that in there.
And Miller, that sounds very much like some stuff that you've talked about over the years. Do you have any thoughts you want to toss in there as well?
Yeah, I love the idea of a yearly sort of a culmination. I think that's something that should and could come as to kind of wrap the community in. I also want to keep in mind, how do we keep the community wrapped to this? And I know that's not this meeting, but I'm still in there with the microgreens, still thinking there's got to be something we can do with microgreens, either with the school or with the community. I just think it's a great way to step into helping people maybe find some kind of income stream through this.
And food truck and food, anybody, baking, you name it.
So if we're thinking about this in the shape of a curriculum and the culmination of an academic year, of a school year in the Farm to Fork program is essentially an open house, but not even necessarily the one that takes place just at the high school, which would be more traditional, obviously, but is locationally at the high school, at 65 Main, at New Boston Beef, at Fort Hill Farms, that it becomes this, a tour of your own community that shows where everybody is. And again,
Taste of Thompson.
the taste of Thompson.
But if you could really, and farm to school, actually, you can write for a greenhouse. To me, that seems like your first place to go. If you want microgreens growing and you want these things to grow, you need a space to grow it in. Our aquaponic farm grows lettuce like crazy. I mean, within 5 weeks, we have lettuce. And it, the fish are doing their job. Few have committed suicide lately, but.
Suicide?
They
That's
just
pretty
jumped out of the tank. But, it does do what it needs to do. So the greenhouse would be key to that. And if it doesn't matter, the greenhouse doesn't have to be on site of the school. As a matter of fact, those grants are always, they want community involvement. So they want, the students to be out in the community, especially around this whole local procurement thing.
And now
So
just for clarity, are you talking about the container,
not the
garden,
container,
just
but
a-
a real green,
a general greenhouse?
a heated greenhouse.
Amanda, to the best of your knowledge, and I know that the farm to school piece isn't your area. Do you happen to know the DOAG grant calendar, or whether they're planning on extending the shipping container garden grants or any of those things?
I don't know if that was the last leg of it. I could look at that quick for you. I guess, in terms of community involvement, like even in my town, we have like a local vor dinner. So people have to like use local ingredients and bring it. It's a sense of community. You could sort of have like the culinary students involved in that. We've done tour to farms where people bike to different farms in the area and you could involve students that way. But let me just double check. Typically, DOAG grants are due in the fall for farmers because that's their slower time into the winter. But I believe that was federal funds they were using for the shipping container. And so it could have been the last of and done. So let me just double check that while we're on.
But Melinda is suggesting that there are other options as well. Just that one was so specific.
Specific to us in Connecticut, yeah.
I do know farm to school though is, I know other when you're mandated to go to a national, I guess, kickoff when you get a grant. And so when I went, many other districts were building greenhouses. So I know it's an allowable expense. It's just getting that community buy-in for it. I know Sarah Eddy and I just partnered on it. She wrote a grant and we were supporting that grant. And she was going to build a greenhouse on her property and our kids were going to go there. She didn't get the funding, but that idea is still a good one.
Can we ask grants to like food trucks? Every single one ask them. Can we do that?
So a food truck enterprise would most likely qualify for a grant from something like the Small Business Association, or there's some smaller private kind of business grants that go out there. There's one that comes around, I think, quarterly for women-owned businesses, but they have to have already been a business for a while. But just by way of a hypothetical. So the woman who does Kai's Orr's household cooking also does private catering. And if she were to expand her business to also have a food truck enterprise, that would be eligible because she would be expanding an existing business by purchasing specific equipment. And, so all grants have specific requirements. There might be some small private foundations that an individual business owner might have access to for something like a food truck. Nothing springs to mind, Amanda, from DOAG for that. They're more
No.
direct farming, I would think.
Yeah, and to the point about the shipping container, within their grant guidance, it was new for this year that they had the additional 2 million in ARPA funds because of the 2023 legislative session. And as you scroll down to the different tracks, track 5, which is the shipping container growing grant, says new for fiscal year 2024 only. So
In Rhode Island, they gave 13 districts grant opportunities and they bought 13 food trucks for school districts. I know our special ed director's wife's school got one. And I'm jealous about that, but I don't have the capacity to do like that right now, but I was jealous. I'm thinking, oh my
It
God.
does seem
why
like an
can't we have that
insurance
here?
nightmare for a school, but that's.
Yeah, it could be an insurance
That
nightmare.
would solve the need for a window for the culinary program for
Yeah.
community camp.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm picturing that big event once a year during birthday, food trucks and the farmers and the gardening, the planting, I mean, all of that, merging all at once, like a
That'd be
big
fun.
humongous. I don't know how far this can get, but I wanted to like everybody go in a whole bunch of cars in a location, parking for, you know what I'm saying? So.
I love a good event.
I would love to be able to do that once a year and see that happen. That'd be great. That would make a lot of money.
You'll kind of tie everything together.
Yeah.
And become a trademark history.
That's probably tying more into the business incubator in the building.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah,
Yeah. And there is definitely overlap
Yeah.
between high school education and adult education, particularly as we're proposing it. But yeah, I mean, it's a slightly different stream at this point.
Are we only talking about like the culinary food connection? Or
Everything being immersed.
I think we're talking about whatever we see as desirable or likely, because right now it's still like, it's open, right? Nothing is final until it's final. And and we've certainly identified some priorities, right? When we did the planning game, the reason that we're pushing in this direction now more than we were at the beginning of when we started talking about this, when it was more a straight business incubator work share concept, is because, 40, 60, however many people were there in that evening, consistently identified this as something that would be desirable, beneficial, fit in with community priorities, was innovative within our scope, something that we can do that makes sense here.
specifically the food connection or just the connection to the school in general?
All of the above.
Mix of
And you-
everything.
I think that the specific term farm to fork was definitely bubbling up to the top. Definitely in conjunction with other educational opportunities at the school to come out of the facility, which to me, to my ear, means, Dan, you have something that you want to say about that, so go
Well, I
ahead and
just
say
think
it.
there's a lot of opportunity for other connections. Like I know you have a social media marketing program, right?
mhm,
And you have business classes at all?
yes,
So any of that stuff could be tied into.
the marketing
Right.
the,
classes, yeah.
connecting the social media and the business
Yeah.
classes with local businesses. And then as any of the, programs, the BOAG programs that you have could be connected with other businesses to do internships and, classes. Business owners could do classes. Because they would see the value hopefully in that, or they're getting in front of the students that might want to intern for them and stuff like that, so.
I think that was kind of the thing we talked early on, with the students meeting up with business owners in town or just outside at 65. And seeing what their interests are and, how to help them out and get them in the right path on, moving them along.
And I think that is where TBA's headspace has been, as it's been discussed in those meetings. And we don't get a lot of time to discuss it in the monthly TBA meetings because they've got their own agenda as well. But I know that both Dan and Brian Yacino have mentioned that, like, maybe this is how you find your next employee by
Right.
these entry-level opportunities, teaching them that but also benefiting from the labor, and then can that transition? So I don't think any of that is off the table. All of it will need to be described
Right.
and ultimately described in a way that's going to be meaningful for somebody who's going to give us money.
Right.
But yeah, tying into the education is kind of what we're talking about tonight. But if we don't have tie-ins to the whole community as a whole, it's dead on arrival. It's gotta be tied in. Everybody, the school's up the hill and 60 miles down the hill, and it's a tie in there. We're identifying these opportunities, but if we don't tie in the TBA and just other community members, it's just gonna be It's just gonna
Right.
wither on the vine.
And EDC has always tie in.
Yeah.
I mean, we started talking about this, it has to be 8 or 9 years ago,
Okay.
an incubator,
Yeah.
before 65
Oh,
Main
okay.
even
Right.
Okay.
came up, an incubator, and like Dan was saying, it would be a place where maybe there was an office and somebody could answer phones for 3 businesses.
Mhm.
And it could be a high school student, and high school students could learn how to use a checkbook, if anybody still uses checkbooks, I don't know.
Nobody still uses
Or something.
Well, something, because people can take
Something
care of
related.
their own money,
Yeah.
it would be a way to tie in. And possibly have an intern somewhere with our businesses. We've always wanted to tie in with
Yeah.
Turtle.
Well, I should probably start coming to your meetings. We're a member, but I don't come to the meetings, so I should probably do that.
Well,
In your spare time.
In my spare time,
Right.
You're
yeah,
always welcome, and you're
Yeah.
welcome to contact Dan.
Yeah.
If you want to put something on the agenda.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
when you met with the students, because I wasn't there that day,
Mhm.
what was the response from them as far as the connection to 65 Main? What kinds of things did they throw out?
Largely very similar to what we got from the fuller session
Okay.
with the adults. However, let me just sort of give some caveats on there. Because I only had an hour with them, and I usually do those events in 2 to 3 hours.
Yeah,
I made it easier. So what I did was I gave them the focus topics that came out of the full session. So it was like the top 25 of the 40 or 50 or 60 topic cards that we had in the larger discussion.
Okay.
And I had them discuss those. But I would say that it wasn't that far off. I will give a second caveat, which was because it was limited in time, I blasted through the synopsis of what we were doing. So it's not clear that there was full comprehension of all the pieces. And I definitely leaned into the specific connection to the school, the vocational aspect, as opposed to the ecology aspect.
gotcha.
Because that would, to me, was a heavier lift in that session, and it was sort of reflected in the questions that were asked and some of
And
the
you had-
comments I got back.
And you had the leadership kids, so.
And I had the leadership kids.
Right.
Right. I can run those things all day. I can go do those public engagement games anywhere at any time for anybody who wants them. At some point they become diminishing returns because you really are hitting the same people over and over and over again. But if anybody wants me to do one for a different group of stakeholders, I'm happy to do it to get that additional piece. It does see, and I've done enough of them within the community that I don't see wildly different results than what I'm expecting. The very first one that we did, the first year that I worked here, we had 104 topic cards. We did it in 3 hours, but the priorities that came out of it actually weren't that different. They just weren't specific to this project. It was, preserving history, supporting local identity, preserving agricultural traditions, all of those things bubbled up, and some things that you would expect to be priorities, nobody really cared about. Nobody, for example, in the very first one that we did, gave a damn about their property values. It was like one of the last priorities that anybody had. And you would expect that to be something that, a group of homeowners would be super concerned about when they came in. So not a lot of surprises anymore. I've already had all my surprises. The point being is that we can continue to do that kind of engagement anywhere, anytime to build interest in the program.
Mhm.
I can, trot a new one out and we can try to reach a wider audience. There's still value in getting the same information sometimes because it reinforces in the minds of the public that a project exists, that it's being undertaken thoughtfully. And the guys in EDC have heard me say a million times, repetition is retention. It's a principle in fundraising, it's a principle in marketing, any of these things where if you want something to really take root, you have to constantly repeat it, because if you say it 10 times, somebody might actually listen to it once, and they might act on it 1 in 20 times or 1 in 100 times.
About the older population in town who does nothing but bitch about the taxes going up on their properties via the school and this and that. How do you engage those folks to get involved with this that is only, you're talking a small increment of this area?
Yeah, I don't think any of us have the real answer.
Well, that's something about work on.
I think if any of us
You're not
had the
gonna
answer
get
to that, we'd be
support,
thrilled.
but you're not gonna-
We can tap into those, yeah.
Yeah,
We can
that's
tap into
right.
those people
That,
and-
that could be part of like the curriculum piece of it. With a tie-in with Teague, right? Because we have the community garden piece. And those students learning about community outreach and parlaying that into probably another pathway towards social work. You're welcome, Melinda. But then but that's a way that you can put those students on the ground to reach out to those.
That
And
would be an
get-
emissary type of.
Right, and then they
Part of their
have
curriculum would
that
be-
connection
Yes.
of when it does come time to
And then they
vote
can
for a
get
budget.
perspective and an older person's view of what they have done in their lifetime. I could go on forever on that for my own life. And that would educate everybody. The kids would see their point of view and vice versa.
Yeah, and let's be clear that that particular conflict is not unique to Thompson.
Right.
Anywhere where you have a
Definitely.
majority older population who is more economically challenged. This,
Yup.
this same point of view about, public education and the amount of money it takes from the public coffers comes up everywhere.
Sure, it's
Uh,
insane.
So, it certainly isn't unique to here, but it remains a challenge that we do all have to deal
But we-
with, clearly.
Engaging the general public in some form or way would be phenomenal. And I think then anybody that they're interested in getting food that's homegrown kind of thing. I mean, that could engage people. There's
Because
a
you
lot of
can
ways.
use those, like in the last time we talked about, maybe somebody who does a home canning operation could come in and teach the students.
Well, I'm one of them and I'm gonna volunteer at Teague. I told them that. Nobody knows how to do this stuff now.
I do.
So this is Anne speaking. We've had a great deal of interest in that, and we'd of course love to have volunteers to teach it again. But we did teach a canning course and had to add second classes because we overfilled. So there's a great deal of interest. We've also started to use some of our DCF prevention money and then another grant which brings in seniors to put seniors and some of these young families together intentionally in some of these learning classes, be it floral design. We also did a crock pot class, that kind of thing. So that kind of integration, if we could find that kind of integration somehow through the incubator, but you need to intentionally put multiple generations in there. That's kind of the trick.
Yeah, and we've talked about at the school level, bringing in, having classes at night, and having the community come in at night and do some culinary
Except your
classes.
older people don't like going out at night.
Yeah. It's
Well,
hard
we
to
do it over dinner and we've actually had people come. We'll start it at 5 and we'll do a light dinner with it and they're home by 6 or 7. It's been very popular. We usually have a wait list for those kinds of programs.
What about, could also partner or work with Thompson Rec, because they do a lot of stuff for seniors.
Mhm.
And they have the ability to schedule things and
Well, they have luncheons and things.
They
now
have
in the
lunches
library,
every
which
day.
would Incorporate the
Yeah.
food that is raised in town.
but they also reach out to the seniors for all their field trips and
Yeah.
bus trips. So
Yeah, he's
they
got
have a
that thing
list and hopefully a lot of the seniors are already watching reading those communications.
Right.
So it might be a way to tie in.
So just to focus this a little bit, so when we're talking about reaching out to the senior population, we are talking about at this point, getting them on board as residents. We are talking about engaging them separately in a discrete event to get their feedback. We're talking about incorporating them somehow into an adult and youth learning path. I just want to get some focus on this. What are we narrowing down on here?
We should incorporate all of that all
Mhm.
together and have that,
Well, part of it is informing them of what is going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Because no matter where we go, I go to the transfer station, I go to the town hall and people saying, what's going on with 929? What's going on with that old Teague building? They don't even know it as the 65 Main project.
Right.
And I try to explain and tell them that we have meetings and we have update meetings and they still don't go, but they are asking, some people
How-
are interested.
How do we communicate with the residents?
Well, put it in the Villager newspaper if anybody's getting it. That's one thing. We've already had a couple of articles.
What did you say, Jean?
oh, I wanted to put, add my 2 cents on that. I'm actually, a senior, nutritional program with the TVCCA. I do, Meals on Wheels also and provide lunch, service for the seniors. I'm for one, could be an example of introducing 65 Main product to them with all of that aspect. And then, from there, getting them introduced to the information about this, then, I can find a way how I can get each one somehow, not just their ideas, but their feedback and also involvement, in, donating money, all of the above. I mean, it starts with one person and then, just grow from there. Each one of us can do something like that in similar manner.
So as a first step, I'm hearing that there might be some appetite to doing a specific engagement event with this population. Which I will be frank, that is a population I am challenged in reaching out to, but it sounds like Jean has an outlet. And Teague certainly does, maybe the Weekend Warrior program, because you're mostly delivering to seniors and families, right? So maybe we can give that some thought sort of in sidebar, because it's a little bit outside of where we are in this particular conversation, but can we add that? The answer is yes. You can wind me up, you trot me out wherever you want. And we do get information from those, and we do build interest and goodwill. And then to Sue's point, we have actually gotten some really generous coverage from the Villager. There's been 3 front page articles in the last 5 months, and I have not sent those press releases. That is the reporter actually contacted me because he's interested in the project. So
Does the town have an email list?
the rec department is the only one that does a real email blast. I don't know of any other department that collects emails.
Austin.
School
It's-
department.
It's often,
It's not a,
you have to go on and register and click which emails you want to receive.
Right.
So if you have somebody who is not tech savvy or doesn't have smartphone or a computer, they're not getting
any of that.
any of that.
Right.
So we post stuff on the page as news stories, and there's 3 that you can see right in the front page. You could dig in and get more. If you're signed up for those alerts, you get them. If you're signed up for alerts from specific boards and commissions, you get their calendar. But there's nothing quite the same as what rec does, because they are proactively sending out to their entire mailing list every time they schedule a new event, and that's thousands of names.
That's why I suggested them as a good.
Right.
resource.
Yeah, and we have used their mailing list for quite a few things.
Well, like the TBA connecting to the elderly population, we could just, I mean, like if there was a flyer for this, like we could
Mhm.
just drop it in the bags when,
Mm.
once a
Yeah.
month they go out.
Yeah.
People like that,
Yes, and Winnie has also done 65 main coverage. I usually solicit that. That's usually me trying to schedule something, and I will be doing that again. You can bet your
They
bippy
were
if they
talking about
select us as a finalist for that Kubota grant.
They talked about this meeting this morning, didn't they?
Oh, did they? Oh, see, I missed that. So there you have it, Valerie. They're covering it independently.
And that's why everybody's here tonight.
No, everybody who's here tonight is here because I harass you. All right, so where else so here's another important bullet point on the agenda that I think we do need to talk about, because again, it's sort of out of my bailiwick, but Melinda raised it as something that I think is important. What is the advisory structure?
There needs to be one. The pathways that we're establishing now, we're in the process of creating advisory boards for them, people in the industry that can give us good guidance, people that understand business better than obviously we do. So we're trying to put those advisory boards together. The big one right now is trying to get the advisory board off the ground for the welding program. And, you know, we've got point people from Electric Boat, Synedia, which is a subcontractor for Electric Boat, obviously our welding teacher, myself, and probably a classroom teacher, so that they're engaged and know what's going on in the building. But we need an advisory board to help us figure out what the next steps are. Curriculum development is a big one. Looking for resources is another, and then just in-kind volunteers that can come in. So advisory board is key, and what that structure looks like.
And how do you solicit that advisory board?
So it's like somebody knocks on the door and invites them to attend, like I did today. Would you be on our advisory board? But I think once you get 65 Main in a place where you're going to start developing programs for it, then bringing the right people around the table will be really helpful, especially from the educational tie-in. I think we can't work in isolation, right? Everything has to come together and everybody be on the same page with what's happening. When we think about that annual event, well, everybody on that board would need to know what's happening to make it work. So they're critical, advisory boards. As a matter of fact, some funding sources require it, like federal dollars from Perkins. They require you to have a advisory board for very good reason.
But you haven't had the advisory boards in place before you have started the curriculum up to this point. So we're not stuck in a chicken egg thing.
No, but technically, we should probably have done that. We got the cart before the horse, but yes.
Okay, also good to know. And another place where some of the organizational partners, meaning the nonprofits who are involved, and you know, because there's 4 or 5, may be able to solicit a wider membership. Because it sounds like the advisory boards for welding are not necessarily, in fact, sounds like none of them are from within the community directly. They're from the field.
I have gotten outreach from community members because of my Facebook posts, asking me if we need any volunteers because they're retired welders from EB interested in helping out. So wouldn't that be a perfect person to ask to come on the advisory board? So that's a way to engage the community.
Excellent. So it's about 7:30. I mean, we've been bouncing around, so well, I'll leave it to you, Melinda, as to whether we want to specifically talk about these bullet points. I mean, this was just whatever we came up with at that meeting we had the other day.
So for me, I need homework, right? And I see realistic timeline here. So what's my next step in trying to pull this, you know, starting to think ahead? You know, there are people I can reach out to. Obviously Johnson & Wales being one of them. So we're trying to expand our culinary program, but I'm just trying to figure out from the school department's perspective as we're planning, what's my next step?
Okay, and as we established earlier, we're looking at like 2 or 3 years of actual development here. And I think we did talk also about maybe inviting DOAG into the next
Good idea.
session to talk about how the state would look at this, right? Because it's a public school. We're a public entity. We're an arm of the state as a municipality.
Mhm.
We're gonna be relying heavily on state, federal, private foundation money. You know, how are we going? We're trying to get the keys that unlock the tumblers, right?
Right.
That either, whether it be for funding or for establishing an advisory board who can do fundraising. It's hitting organizational sweet spots,
Yeah.
right? To set us up for future success when we go back with the real ask. I was going somewhere with that and it's going right out of my head. Well, for timeline. So, you know, the short-term timeframes, which is next month, the next 3 months, the next year. Yes, Matt.
Right, so I think, you know, here we are really talking a lot about the culinary aspect, but we gotta start somewhere, and where does the plan, I forgot the guy's name, who worked on, you know, the plan.
Oh, Wayne and Grant, yeah.
You know, how does Wayne's plan, you know, when that starts getting implemented, we want to tie the botany program, the biology program, into that aspect of it too. So we've been focusing on talking about the culinary and a little bit about the business, but if you want to tie that in, that should come in on the ground floor. Hey, we're planting, you know, chestnut trees here, and we're planting moss down here, and why? Why are we doing that and tying that in? So that's an earlier stage of it. Obviously, the garden beds, which we already have up there, you know, that ties into the culinary and whatever little agriculture, but I think that's.
Yeah, that seemed, my instinct there is that that's a connection we should be making with the Yukon, whatever the long title is of their agricultural and natural sciences program. Amanda, do you know who would be a contact there for this kind of endeavor? If we wanted to get involved in, I don't know, cross-pollinating there somehow?
So you're talking about on the faculty education end or more with Yukon Extension?
Well, either, I guess.
I mean, we could reach out to Jiff because she deals with food on the Yukon Extension side. I mean, like, for instance, we're working with a professor on a farm hack program and they're tying it into curriculum with engineering students and agriculture students, right? There's a deep web there of people, but I mean, we could start with Jiff Martin at Yukon Extension and see what her suggestion would be.
Okay.
Tara, can I chime in? This is Maura.
Of course you can, Maura.
Well, just trying to make sure that to sort of piggyback on what the previous person was saying. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name. Just about the whole permaculture concepts as well. This is a specific type of agriculture, and you know, just being able to educate on that this is a specific way of planting things, and more than that, of utilizing the whole circular system of the environment of water, food, sun, you know, just being able to, you know, get the most yield in this specific way of using, you know, soil. There's so many components, as a lot of you learned with Wayne Wiseman. So just trying to make sure that we still keep that in mind too, as far as that permaculture is a specific way of doing things, and to be able to teach the kids about that as well, that is a big part of this food forest and the rest of it.
Yeah, that's a great point, Maura.
Everything is interrelated. That's
So,
what
right.
needs to be.
Right, so
Everything is interconnected. Excuse me.
I have a biology degree, and I forget who I was talking to. Somebody said, the only thing I remember about biology was the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And
I missed that day.
well, so you probably don't remember anything about biology. So, but, so, you know, I know that, I know other things about biology, but I don't know a whole lot about plants because I didn't read biology. But but I think tying this permaculture into a curriculum somehow, it will put real world stuff into biology or into,
Yeah.
I assume we have an environmental science class. No,
Yeah.
No, we can take it online.
so, but tying something right here in town, in its infancy stage, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, you know, Wayne gave us a crash course those first 2 episodes, and I got a lot out of it, but a lot of it, you know, not went over my head, but when, you know, just, it was a lot, it was tidal wave.
Yeah, it's a lot all at once, for
And,
sure.
But if we could get kids involved in a class, that would be.
And I
huge.
think that was at least part of Maura's point.
yeah.
Say
right.
assisting in actually, you know, helping out the start of it.
Yeah, and I think actually that has to do with whatever Valerie just dropped
Yeah,
here in
yes,
the
Valerie.
chat, right? Hold on, I gotta switch my. Are there any items we are positioned to actually do now in the next 6 months, 12 months? Yes, I agree with Matt, starting now, being involved in some active action way with the school, the idea of cut flowers. The short answer to that, the question that's embedded in there is we are kind of doing what we can do now because that's what we have the money for, right? The renovation is paused, and until I get a pool of money to proceed with any of these other pieces, other than this planning grant, which is what we are paying for as we go, our actions are kind of limited to that. It's planning and word of mouth. Unless somebody has a brilliant idea that is zero cost that we can get implemented.
And you can do, just have some people volunteer. That, for example, have them walk through 65 Main and look and identify invasives. And then do, okay, how, let's say we've got barberry, how do we get rid of that particular one? And, you know, make it an instructional thing for any of the kids in whatever science class.
But also adults too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I
don't know.
and I think that
like I
the,
said, I don't know anything about plants, and I'd be
Like
great to.
I walk up at the dam and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's like, there's this called, it's called burning bush and we, you know, it's everywhere.
it's everywhere. Yeah,
I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna take years to get rid of that.
yeah. Once you see it, you can't unsee
Yeah.
it. But and I think in earlier meetings,
Yeah.
Sue, you and Pat, and we have, you know, discussed at least in the abstract that maybe that's something that the Conservation Commission can take on as an action item,
It would be nice if we got more involved.
right? And
Definitely.
now you've got a new conservation agent coming
I
on,
don't know
so
who
that
person is from Adam, so.
Uh, she'll be starting on the 20th of May, and I'm sure that I'm going to throw tons and tons of stuff at her coming in, and she is also going to be the wetlands agent, but the Conservation Commission, which is a great commission, I think has not had a great project to pursue, and I think they could
yeah.
use one in order to, again, as we're talking about making connections, right? We've got all kinds of people all over the town of Thompson who say they value green space or they value agriculture or but that's as far as that goes, not necessarily because they are hypocritical or don't mean what they say, but because it's one thing to say you value something. How many people know how they can put value into action, right? Where they have the opportunities.
I think their efforts have been valued.
And that as well. And so, and we're getting a little off topic from education, but or at least
Same
off
thing.
academic education.
Right.
But
So,
but
still
adult
education.
education is still important, yes.
You educate by doing.
Yep. And yeah, it's, and in some cases, you know, once you go on the walk, the sidewalk, I would like to go on a sidewalk. I have not been down there. Once you go on a sidewalk, say, I'd like to help with this. And maybe you do it for 1 hour on one Saturday, say, nah, this pulling weeds is not for me. Or maybe you get really into it and it becomes, then you become part of the team. And so if well, 50, if 20 people show up to a walkthrough. And, you know, 10 people come back to volunteer for an hour and 2 people stay to be part of the main team, then that's a success in my.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. So, you know, going back to homework, so part of my homework will be when the new conservation agent starts, and look, she's not gonna be able to do this right away. In some ways, it's, well, in a lot of ways, it's too bad that we don't have Dan Malo anymore, because he was super involved in this project and would have loved to have led that. So now we're in this transitional period, but again, other people taking leadership roles.
Mm.
Because this is an issue for me personally. I know that if this is left to 1 or 2 or even just 10 people to manage,
You're gonna be swamped.
it's not going to succeed because there's too many moving parts, and because it will then become either personality dependent or vulnerable to people moving jobs, getting sick. You just don't know, right? So the reach has to be broad and interconnected, right? So yes, a leadership role here. If the Quiet Corner Garden Club wants to get involved, whatever we can do to connect to UConn, either Extension or the College of Agricultural and Natural Science, or whatever it's called. What is TVA's leadership role? Because and this is something that although I think everybody here has taken on a role. Like when I go into TVA meetings and I say, hey, guys, how do you want to be involved, right? I'm describing this to you. Where do you see your role? Partly it's because we don't have time dedicated to it, but with only a couple of exceptions, the folks here and a little bit with some other people who give me some feedback, it's not being grabbed, right? So we need to have people grab pieces of this and expand the reach of what we're doing. And that is also educational in a sort of in a community way.
I would love to know a way to get more people to grab it, because they try that with all kinds of things and everybody just sits there. You know, it's rare that somebody goes, I'll help.
Sometimes it's the way it's phrased, I know, and sometimes it's just visualizing, right? So maybe to whoever's point, your point, or your point, the site walk,
It's your stage of life.
the,
Then you join it because it hits your stage of life now, and it makes you feel like you can contribute,
Right.
which is what we all want to do.
I think on the TVA side, visualizing it at this concept right now is a little difficult for a bunch of business owners, because they don't see a full purpose to where it's gonna actually end up.
Yeah,
And
that's
we've
true.
talked about a lot of different things where
The
business,
bottom line.
business incubator, businesses helping, the students or other people in town, growing. But we're not at that point where we can physically jump in and actually go and do that. Granted, we could right now anywhere, but with 65 being, the key
It's supposed to be the linchpin.
to the support,
At least we're trying to keep them informed, keep them interested, keep them thinking of how it could impact them.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we've been bringing that up for over a year.
Mhm.
but it is still an abstraction.
It-
right?
oh, it is.
It's always an abstraction.
But
So to
at
go
least
back
to
to,
keep them informed, the project's still going on.
Right.
What do you think? Maybe in a year you could use somebody, or you have an
Right.
idea.
Right.
so to go back to, the simple point that Valerie raised, which is a good one, what can we do now? I'm going to backtrack a little bit on my statement. We do have an asset that's usable right now, which is all those garden beds, right? It was the thing that we put in first. It was the first $2,500 investment that we made that has since been leveraged into like $390,000 worth of grant money. But it is sitting unused. I mean, you can currently register for a plot through the recreation office, but they don't have the bandwidth to pursue it actively. And when we first set it up, it was an entirely different staff. Oh, and it was also during COVID, so we had a lot of free time on our hands. But it is there and it is usable. Now, Teague has gotten some use out of it. But, and of course, we go back to that, you need to get it on your plan before the school year even starts.
So
But maybe we can start that planning now for
So my experience with growing things at the school, so you can't plant anything until another couple of weeks outside, right? And so the botany class has always planted outside. And then the students leave for the summer and the custodians maintain it and pick the produce because who else is going to take care of it? So it's just, so to me, that doesn't work well.
And that's why you're interested in the greenhouse, because that's seasonless.
Well, it's
Yeah, but you
more
still have to
seasonal.
work that too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You
Wait,
do
but
have to
don't
work
harvest
that.
it in August.
Been there, done that.
with the
Right.
community
It's
gardens, could you
done.
get a buy-in with the students that are interested in it? To, support it through the summer at 65,
It's hard to
'cause-
sustain that.
because at the school side, that's in the courtyard, right? So they can't physically get in there to do it, or?
Oh, so we took that old greenhouse down, that's gone.
Okay,
But even the aquaponic farm, right?
right.
We keep it running in the summer because the fish need to do something.
Mhm.
And so we usually pluck stuff out, bring it down to Teague, or
Yeah.
the custodians take it home. We do keep it running in the summer.
Right,
But there aren't students there. And honestly, that aquaponic farm, outside of the connection with the botany class, isn't really integrated into the curriculum. Right now, it's, fueling food service, which is great. Somebody needs to be in charge of
yeah,
that curriculum. And so it'll be the same thing with 65 Main connection. Someone has to be that, between 65 Main and the school curriculum and making sure that the kids are part of the community and that keeps thriving.
mhm,
Because the minute you take your hands off a project like that, it just kind of falls apart.
right.
So,
Anne, let me bring that conversation around to you, because this goes to some other conversations we've had as well. And of course, Teague has been involved in that garden since we first put it in the ground. Your youth mentorship programs do not end with the school year, correct?
They don't. We've had camp in the summers before. We're only running our camp for 2 weeks this summer, and that's toward the end of the summer. We really did try to get youth over there. We have a garden of our own right up back. Water was always an issue there.
And still would be, which
It
is.
still would be. And,
Right.
I think that the best thing, I don't want to back out too far from this, but we're so limited. There's 14 of us serving 4 towns, and we're just so limited in being able to get kids back and forth. We can offer it to our mentors, but the fact is we have a lot of raised beds around our own building, and they tend to tend those beds or harvest from those beds rather than going over to 65. I think the best thing we could do, and I think about this a lot, I attended that gardening conference. I think really working up a group in town that had a leader, just like you're saying, kind of getting that group down there and getting them excited. And I think that has to happen through recreation. I don't think we have to charge for the beds, but could we get a group of adults and then bring the kids along? Because you need that. I guess I'm rambling a little bit. What I've realized is with our own garden is I can't just send a bunch of volunteers up to our own garden and say weed. They get completely overwhelmed. They don't know anything about gardening. They want somebody who knows something about it there. And therefore you have to have a leader that has that kind of time.
Well, how about we get seniors involved, like I said, the people that are eating lunches here, the seniors for the lunches. Start with there and have them volunteer. There's quite a few, even in Putnam, where the location where I'm at, there's a lot of seniors that doesn't know what to do. They don't have any idea what they want to do for the rest of the day after they have lunches with me. That's a perfect example of them volunteering. They would really want to get involved. If there's somebody who can teach them, I could be one of the person to start that in a certain location where give them some kind of sense in education or something, someone like you or someone that you can be connected to. teach them what they need to do as far as, you know, the planting part of it and growing the garden. I mean, from, you know, the general, you know, 101 of it. And I think you would have quite a few seniors would actually, you know, want to get involved in. And this is something seniors are perfectly, you know, good to start with.
I have often thought that the seniors who live at, what is the,
Gladys Green.
Gladys Green.
not Gladys Green, the one that
One-
actually,
Merritt Square.
thank you.
Oh,
You know, they must not have much opportunity to have little recreational plots of their own. That is a perfect population for that.
It's the water again.
Well, the water is an issue, so I'd have to work something out this time with Nick probably, who was the
Right.
last person who filled them. You know, if we could revive that structure, and now we're already getting late in this year to do anything like that, but that is a natural to me, because you can walk, right?
Mhm.
So you're getting
Yep.
people out walking, building health, getting them outdoors, learning, getting people aware of the facility.
You get to do something.
So again, my in there is non-existent, right? It's not like I can just walk into a management office there and say, hey, will you? So I would need, in order to break into that, a better in. And maybe that's you through the meals program, or, yeah. Again, a little off topic from where we were today, but it is a question that was asked and worth answering, because I think it is to the general benefit of the project to always be doing something there. And there's a pin in the renovation right now until we get a couple of things squared away. But we are almost at the end of the initial renovation grant money. So after that, it's somebody's got to give us some more money to work on the building. I have all these applications out. One of them will succeed, but I don't know when or for how much yet.
I drove by there the other day and was like, whoa, it really looks great.
Oh, you haven't been over there until recently?
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, but it won't stay looking great for too much longer if we don't get it painted. So that's one of the last things we'll do with the first round of funding. We can't paint until we get a little bit of the siding repaired. So Dave Eddy came over last week and he's sharpening his pencil to give me an estimate, but unless that is a very sharp pencil, I don't actually know how we can do both things. And there's a chicken and egg, that's not a chicken and egg. They have to go in a certain order. The gutters will also be put on. That contract already exists, but I can't have the gutters put on until it's painted, and I can't paint it until the siding's repaired. So I have these three things that I know are going to be done. I just don't quite know how we're going to get them done yet, but we will.
When would we have running water at the house? I assume the water's
Is it
shut off.
groundwater
All of
down there?
everything's out of it. It's an empty box. There's no plumbing fixtures. It's all been stripped out.
So that won't be until the.
That's
the
because of
house
all
is
the
asbestos and crap.
But is it town water or a well?
Town water,
Because
town water, town septic.
that would be our water answer.
That would be a possible water answer. Now, it is
Well,
on,
for the raised beds, it would be plenty
When I
of water.
slept in water in the back of my car, it was not fun.
no, and we all did it that summer. For those of us who were not involved in the summer of 2020, a group of, I don't know, 6 to 10 volunteers traded off a 5-gallon watering sprayer.
No, I took.
And
that
you-
was
and you
not
took-
fun. I took probably 10 5-gallon containers, sloshed them in the back of my car.
Yeah, that's how we were doing it. We had the backpack water, but finally we just went to the 5-gallon containers. I had great arm muscles that summer. It was good.
Now, going back to what came out during the permaculture unit, there was talk of irrigating from the French River, not out of the question, an added layer of cost to put in that infrastructure, probably the most feasible of all, because even though it is on town water is treated and it's not free. So is it an option? Yes, it is an option. I would say that it is a sub-ideal option.
Mhm.
And Wayne had also talked about water cashment from roof runoff and, so we have
Cisterns.
built into that.
So if I could just interject too with town water, I know we're in a completely different area now than where we started, but we have town water for a drip irrigation system in our garden up back. And I came to the conclusion, once we had a couple of nice rainy summers, I came to the conclusion that that water has so much chlorine in it, it was burning the plants. It also increases our water costs pretty significantly when we water with that water. So that is something to consider, that if we could use some other source, we really ought to be looking that way.
Yeah, and I think that topic actually came up during at least one of the Wayne,
You gotta water test the
presentations.
French River too.
Yeah,
Well,
that definitely came
Wow.
up.
You would need to have filtering and treatment, and I think that was the idea with the cisterns, collecting the roof water and then having some kind of filtration. I believe that was the outcome.
Maybe that's that.
All right, so we're coming up right on 8 o'clock. So I just want to give Melinda any opportunity for sort of final thoughts about this session, and then just talk a little bit about what we're gonna do in the next couple of months.
Well, and I made a ton of notes, so I mean, there's obviously things that I can work on. One of the things that just strikes me is that, trying to figure out putting an advisory board together to just talk about curriculum and the alignment with 65 Main seems to me a critical piece, and maybe this time we'll put the horse before the cart. And, do it that way. But really starting to talk about people and, the whole idea with the permaculture, environmental science, forestry, all of that is a pathway I haven't even considered. And so, it's an interesting idea about that. Need to learn a little bit more.
I don't think it has to be a pathway, but just a class, science class. I mean,
Yeah,
They can be
science, botany,
So,
Yeah.
so,
a
so
mix just
here's
to kind of throw it
my-
in.
my biggest worry is that and this is not that I'm climbing up on my soapbox, but we cut so many teachers out of the high school that we can only run the classes we're running.
Right.
If I want to add a class, I have to give something else up. Right? And kids want to take the courses that we're running. So we've got to figure out how we're going to be able to add these classes in. And does it mean a staffing impact, or do we give something else up? And I guess that's a question to ask the kids, like, what are these courses that you find that we could look at enrollment? That'll give us some indication of what's popular and what's not, and start to work on that. But to me, it just seems like I need to start putting a group together that I can work with when we're talking about curriculum, scope and sequence, and the alignment to the projects that are happening at 65 Main. Because we are 3 years out, but we've got to plan that.
Right, so if you could write those up into something that I can include in my rolling summary of workshop to workshop, that would be great.
Okay.
And I will reach out to DOAG, maybe somebody at Yukon Extension. Amanda, I have the notes you dropped in the chat, the contacts there. If anybody has any other thoughts on that regard, please send them to me, and I will try to arrange for that as the follow-up. I think when Jocelyn and Amanda and I talked last week, I had sort of posited that the next one would be a little more focused on adult education. But maybe it's actually a little more useful to get some information from those sources. I think the adult education piece ties in more with the business incubator side, so I think that we can sort of blend that from sort of the third month of this unit into that follow-up unit. Now, we did this on this night because the fourth Wednesday, everybody up the school was occupied, and it would be silly to have the education unit without any of the educational people involved. Are we okay to go back to the fourth Wednesday of the month for May, which would be the 22nd?
I can't.
I mean,
I won't be here.
But that's just.
well, I mean,
one
I'll
person.
send it out in the group tomorrow, I guess, and then.
Yeah, I also have, Teague has another meeting as well that night.
All right, because if that date won't work, I will have to figure out an alternate date, and off the top of my head, I don't know what that might be. This time it was easy because there was a fifth Monday and there's never any meetings on a fifth Monday. But so I'll take a look at that for May. So I'll send that out tomorrow. Anybody else? Final thoughts?
Is there a, I know you send out your summary every month, but is there a more public facing kind of summary, or one, could we create one that could go out to all the different email chains that there are available?
Yeah, and Valerie's asked a similar question in the past. I have not put the rolling notes up because it's a huge freaking document and I'd be reposting and reposting and reposting every month. I guess I don't mind doing it. I just don't know that anybody's gonna read 100 pages of
Well,
a synopsis of our conversation.
that's why I mean, can there be a more public facing version just to help get the word out there?
Just even
Yeah.
like just a, this is,
Like a
these are the
newsletter?
projects and this is where we are in the process of them.
Yeah, I mean, the village has been serving the function for me very
Right.
nicely,
Yeah, I was
but,
gonna say, the
but that's
villager
when
with
it
a little
feels
more
like,
detail.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
That takes up space on your email, which some people don't have a lot of.
well, I don't think what Dan is suggesting is an email thing. I think he's suggesting something like on the town website or
Well,
Facebook, or maybe you are.
Add something like that, I would send it out to the TBA mailing list, and then I know there's like EDC, trails, wherever we can be slipping that in for people to see.
I can probably come up with something. Sure, sure. In my free time.
More homework.
Yeah, thanks. Unless anybody would like to take that for me.
Well,
Yeah, I don't see anybody jumping up and down.
What do you want it to look like?
I have no
I
idea.
knew Jessica would start thinking about raising her hand.
In your spare time.
And Tom, Jessica.
Let me,
I know,
let me,
it's
let me
already
think
get-
on it. Let me think on it, because there certainly is value to having the monthly updates be more regular and easier to digest. I don't know how I would distill that yet, so I'd have to think about it.
Like a one-page newsletter that doesn't have a whole lot of information, but just some bullet points about what's happening.
Yeah,
And then we can kick it out on Facebook and send it out to the parents, at least from my end.
Can we just stick the report that you do send into AI and say, summarize this for?
Don't get me started on AI.
it works.
It works.
Do not get me started on the evils of AI.
The business meetings that I've been working at, that's all they're talking about.
That's how people are writing grants
in
now.
business-
It's not gonna ever be how I write a grant. Thank you very much.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be that way, but just to summarize what our meetings can be beneficial. And you can tweak it. I've done enough stuff with it.
Thank
where
you for your suggestion. I will take that all under, Amanda, go ahead.
I'll do it for you.
Yeah, I guess I was just wondering, Tara, like in terms of where the public can go to get the information, because like if you just Google 65 Main, it talks about your project launch from last fall, but like, is
Nothing
there a
else.
dedicated page on the town website where if you've got newsletters or social, you can just put that link and anybody could just check in any time for this info?
There is not, and that's just a bandwidth problem, to create a page and,
oh boy.
it probably could be done, but it would be a mildly Herculean effort.
Okay, I guess instead of like trying to reach everyone to give updates, people could just know, go to thompsonct.org/65 Main and your flyers are there, your notes or billets are there, kind of thing.
Yeah, clearly I'm going to have to come up with something.
Sounds like a job for Super Grace.
Yeah.
I Super Bryce,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay, you can send Super Bryce down to
But
me. I was
actually Danette is actually good at creating web pages.
Okay, guys, it's 8 o'clock, so thank you all, and I'll send the stuff out within the week, probably not tomorrow, but before the end of the week anyway, the synopses, and maybe I'll have solved a newsletter problem by then.
Sorry, I'm a latecomer to this town. What are you, are
Good
you
night,
the head
everyone.
of the school?
I am the superintendent.
So you recently took that position?
No, I've been here